republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided, as is required by Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, with respect to the Home News Tribune to publish the same. This announcement must be entered into the minutes of this meeting. For those attending today's meeting, please be aware that all board meetings are recorded via audio. Roll call, Maria.
Chairman Engel.
Here.
Commissioner Frankel.
Present.
Commissioner Katz.
Here.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
Here.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Here. The administrator is on his way in. He's just on New Road, so he should be here any minute.
Want me to start with these?
Yeah, you start.
Good start.
So these are the ballots that had either no postmark and then they were received after the 48 hours, or they had a postmark and it was after November 2nd. There's 148 ballots in total.
I don't know if we even need to reject them. We'll be getting more of these in real time. So you want to reject them? Have we done that
Yes.
before? Move that we reject the late ballots.
Second. That's all we have. That's it.
Okay, well, you do it by day, we do it by meeting, all right?
All right, then roll call.
Chairman Engel.
On the ballots, yes, to reject.
Commissioner Frankel.
Yes, to reject.
Commissioner Katz.
Yes, to reject.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yes.
Commissioner Jello.
Abstain.
Commissioner Benjamin.
Yes.
Do you want me to explain?
Sure.
These are the ballots that came in that had no postmark, and we received them after the 48-hour period. So it says if they were received within the 48-hour period, then they were deemed on time. Or ones that were postmarked after the 2nd, and then 2 others.
Okay, so all of those were afterwards?
Yeah, that's 148 in total.
Okay.
As a matter of law, they're rejected whether we.
Right. Well, then I'd like to change my vote to reject
Yeah.
these. Thank you.
You actually wanted to know what you voted for?
That's why I abstained.
That's why you abstained.
Yeah.
That's why
know.
I would support to vote for something.
That was true.
Having just walked in the door, I did not know what the subject matter was. But now that I know, I vote to reject as well.
Those, the late ones.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know what they're
Find out what that is actually over.
Okay. It'll work.
Well, do you want me to go into the Old Bridge piece first before we do the, so again, I wanted to, good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
So for the provisionals tonight, I want to get your guidance in terms of two questions that will help us in terms of tabulating tonight and moving forward. One would be, the first question would be emergency ballots that were used on election day that were put into provisional certificates and then put into the provisional.
They were put into provisional envelopes.
Yes,
And the envelopes were completed, so the voter was identified.
Yes.
As
a ballot. And so, and again, not that, we won't know the full scope of it until they actually physically open the actual.
Are they in the provisional ballot counts
Yes,
already?
yes. So again, because we can't open it, I mean, if we could, sometimes you could see that
Yes.
it's physically.
Yes.
identified. So that would be the first question was, would you accept those ballots to be counted as?
How many, John?
Again, we can't physically open them up and know the extent of it.
I'll give you my view. The answer is absolutely yes. The emergency ballots were used because there were no paper provisional ballots at the sites, which there should have been. And this is a way for people, this is provisional ballot is supposed to be a fail-safe. And the only issue in terms of using the emergency ballots was the question of whether they could otherwise be identified as voters that were legally entitled to vote. If they're in a provisional ballot envelope, our staff can research that and determine whether in fact that particular voter is entitled to vote. Whether it has inside it a provisional ballot printed out through our voting machine, a provisional ballot and a paper ballot, or an emergency ballot. If it's in the provisional ballot envelope, properly identified, and we determine that voter has not otherwise voted and is entitled to vote, it should be counted.
So again, for our newer commissioners, the provisional certificates, and then we're going to show you an example of ones that already been reviewed by staff, as if it was a provisional voter. So all the identifying information that the voter gave was checked against the voting records. They're verifiable voters in the correct polling location. And again, once we open up, we'll identify which ones use the ballot card, and then which ones, if there were any, use emergency ballots.
And here's my concern, because we were given different directions from the AG's office that day when we discussed provisional and the emergency ballots with them. Having been told specifically that this was not the kind of an emergency that would warrant the emergency ballot. My bigger concern is that because not every voting machine has the emergency ballots in the back, I believe only one or two, possibly at each site would have one. Is that not correct?
No, it's supposed to be one at every site.
Every site. And I know that there were not even an option in other areas. People were in fact leaving as opposed to staying with that ballot. So I am a bit surprised that you are as adamant about making it a count.
Our
Commissioner
voters,
Jamil?
Thank you.
He's waiting.
I guess for me, it hinges on, just how much verifiable information is available in the provisional, I guess, what, the sheet or the envelope?
Provisional, yeah.
So my understanding, and I think the AG's suggestion to us was based squarely on the statute, and it went basically into the verification aspect of the ballots. And so, that is my concern. I guess it depends on that aspect. If I'm being told that you're absolutely able to verify the identity, the eligibility, and all of those requirements of the voters because of the provisional envelope that it's in, and be able to do that, then I guess then in essence it's a provisional ballot, but for the fact that the actual form is emergency, but the rest of it is qualifies, I guess, as a provisional. But I do agree with the concern of, is there an issue as to consistency if there's a host of voters who didn't have the opportunity to get that? I'm not sure how that plays out with, the fact that, someone did in fact vote, and their vote, we should be, I guess, erring on the side of making sure every vote counts. So I like to weigh that, so it depends.
Yes.
Can you show us a sample of it, or?
I could, we have one in there.
These are provisionals, right?
Well, these, but the certificate would be the same. If everyone would fill that one, we don't. But I'll give you one. Did you get one from upstairs?
For what?
Just as an example, one with the staff kind of research on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can show you one. So again,
I'll pick one out as kind of an example. So,
this will be certificate, and then we'll bring down on this side, on the opposite side. A research sheet. We would have a research instrument that has staff research on the side that verifies all this information. We check the signature, we check the maybe there were any reason for the machine's not working at a particular time.
Well, we don't know it's an emergency ballot until you open up.
We don't know it's emergency ballot until we physically seal it. We don't know that.
We don't even know how many are in it.
No, we don't.
It's your
So
turn.
Commissioner, that's your day.
Yeah, there were several thoughts. One, the Attorney General's opinion, office opinion, was that we don't count the emergency ballots that were put back in the thing because we couldn't identify whether the person that voted was legitimately entitled to vote. because we could not check, as per the statute for emergency ballots, essentially the paper poll books, which they could have checked before. In fact, based on the Attorney General's opinion, logically, there shouldn't have been any emergency ballots at the polls at all, because we have new poll books and there's nothing to check. Right?
Commissioner, if I just piggyback on that, but speaking with the Attorney General, he did say, given the set of facts, that we would be able to look at a provisional sheet and verify that's a viable voter, that they would be more willing, they said that would be a more defensible position to accept those ballots. Than just
Of course. I mean, and the whole reason that they were used was because, pursuant to law, we were supposed to have provisional ballots at the polls. We didn't have. We, the election officials, which is by the responsibility for providing those is the county clerk, but in any event, the combined election officials did not provide the voter with the fail-safe that they're supposed to get. Using the provisional ballot envelopes allows us to do that.
My concern, thank you, I have received and had spoken personally with two persons regarding their unfortunate circumstance. In one instance, the person did in fact sign whatever she was given the envelope. She in fact was not sure if it was an emergency or if she filled it out. In the other instance, the gentleman did not sign it, so there was no name on the outside, nothing that transpired in my mind to what the first person had done. And again, this is very unusual circumstances. People want to make sure, the poll workers, that people in fact could vote. So if the machines weren't working and they were handed some piece of paper, one signed, one didn't, already there's a problem. And as long as I've been on, the thing that I've always prided myself on was the consistency that we've had across the county, right? And the state, of course, and the manner in which we handle things. This was an unusual set of circumstances. I'm not faulting anyone, I'm just concerned that we judge the ballots appropriately based on the information that we have to have in order to make them accurate and valid.
And what I was saying, Commissioner Katz, was just that the concern of the Attorney General, I think we're in agreement. Their concern had to do with verification, and if that is in fact cured by the fact that it's on a provisional ballot slip, then it's no issue to me.
Commissioner Greco?
So you just gave us one scenario. Okay, the one scenario was they took the emergency ballot, they filled out the emergency ballot, they put it in a provisional envelope, which the poll workers were given, was put in the provisional bag, and the custody was not broken or anything like that. That's a scenario you just provided.
Correct.
There are multiple scenarios that we're going to have to go over. In this scenario, I think, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but it seems like we're all in agreement that, I think so, that we should be counting that particular ballot, as long as those procedures took place. As we go through, and there's other situations, we're going to have to look at each one and how each one is developed and how each one looks at it and how each one is monitored and how, I mean, if somebody just put that's one scenario. If somebody just put an emergency ballot, nothing out there, put it in the bag, or put it in, let's say, supplies, which we have had many different, we're going to have to look at every case of what we had, and I think as commissioners, we're going to have to make a determination.
They don't even know if they're registered.
And we don't, and we're going to have to make a determination, would we count it or would we not count it? But this one, the scenario you just, at least what you just told me, I would be definitely inclined to say yes, count those votes. But I just want to make everybody aware of, there's a lot more scenarios that we're going to go through.
But the bags were already opened now, so how if you open, did those bags not get opened with provisional?
The bags
And
themselves
the
were.
emergency in the same bag?
The
And what
answer
if
is
some
we
of them
don't know.
had the signatures?
The answer is we don't know.
I'm asking.
Because
They're
no,
here, they
no, we
weren't
weren't.
opened yet?
We had the provisional ballots, we had provisional ballot envelopes, which came back in provisional ballot bags. Which
That's what I'm
Tom is-
talking about,
No,
the
I
bags.
know, I
The
got it.
bags.
But what Tom is saying,
You're at a time, please.
we do not know if those provisional envelopes, which are sealed, contain a provisional ballot or potentially contain an emergency ballot that used a provisional ballot bag. That's what Tom is talking about. We won't know that until everything is researched and then we open it. So he's asking us that guidance before we open it because we can't give you any, he can't give us any numbers. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's my question.
Which
Commissioner Moskowitz, do you want to follow up on that?
I want to clarify, the physical ballots have been taken out of the bag, provisional bag, and are now separate from the actual bag. Is that the case or not?
Correct.
yes.
Well, if that's the case, my point was, what happened? Did people take all of the ones that had signatures and put them separate from the ones that didn't have signatures? I gave you my scenario. I know one person had to sign the envelope, one person did not. Who made that decision to
Well,
check
we
the ballots?
would treat those as we would, again, with the sheets, as we would any provisionals that we research. We segregate those, hold for commissioners, provisionals for you guys to actually either reject or to accept. So the ballots that I'm talking about are the ones that they're in front of Commissioner Jallo and Pennsylvania, are the ones that staff has
The actual
actually
emergency.
researched. These are viable voters that have filled out the appropriate paperwork. We can confirm they're viable voters, and just upon opening tonight, whether it's the ballot card or a paper provisional ballot, which I'll get into in a second, or an emergency ballot.
How many are there now?
For, in there?
Yeah,
Or you mean for Old Bridge in total, or just
no, in total.
in total? I think I don't have the exact number.
10
It's
to
like
11,000.
It's like 900.
Gross before they read.
What's it?
No, I mean the ones that were emergency.
We won't know.
We won't know.
We can't know
We
until.
won't know until we open them up. So that's
Exactly.
the
The total number of provisionals was 10,900 something, or whatever the number was, something like that. That's before they were researched, which many of them will be rejected because people weren't registered to vote or for some other legitimate reason. Until they're opened, after the staff determines that they're entitled to vote, that they're legitimate voters, until they're opened, we can't determine what type of ballot is physically in that envelope. That's what.
And when will that process start?
After the,
Tonight.
for all-
Really can't vote on it.
Oh, no, he can't.
No, we haven't.
He wants, I'm sorry, he just wants us to have the process that we all agree on, the process of what we would follow. And what comes after that, then we're going to go through, there's other processes, but this one process, they need guidance right now. So from the commissioners, we have to give them guidance on what Commissioner Katz just outlined as far as that was concerned. So we don't know what kind of balance inside, you know it's filled out the way it was there. Are we okay? And that's, I guess, your question for us as commissioners to go ahead, correct?
Correct. That would be the ask.
Tom, would you like a motion to do that?
I would love a motion.
Okay. I move that all ballots in properly completed provisional ballot envelopes that the staff has determined, or we have determined, are legitimate voters and legitimately entitled to vote, regardless of whether it is a provisional ballot of any type inside the envelope or an emergency ballot, be counted.
Second.
Second? Oh, did you want to say something?
Second.
Second, oh, okay. Roll call, Maria.
Chairman Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Franklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Katz?
Yes.
Commissioner Moskowitz?
No.
Commissioner Jallo?
Yes.
Commissioner Benjavenga?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so scenario 2, kind of cover that one, would be scenarios where we're getting paper provisional certificates, and we open them up and we see paper provisional ballots in them that was printed by the clerk on election day. Now, some of those ballots are not going to have the appropriate barcode that you notice on those ballots. So if we were to put them in, they'd be naked ballots, and the fact that the machine wouldn't be able to recognize which town, which district they would apply to. So again, just in terms of, wanted to ask of the commissioners, the county clerk is asking for a process for consistency of results and reporting, would be that we would take those provisionals, and again, with the Dem and the Republican, remake those ballots onto ballots that actually have the barcode for that particular town, so that when it's read into the machine, it would be read for the appropriate town and district and would be going with the results reporting as well as for that day. Consistent with what we do for like remakes, if that makes sense.
Commissioner Moskowitz, next.
Thank you. Did every town receive those provisional ballots from the county clerk's office?
Yes.
Every town?
Mhm.
Okay.
Eventually.
Commissioner Jones.
That's my point.
How did this come about?
So the county clerk, when the issue was identified in the morning regarding the routers and the ability to produce provisional cards, as it were, the county clerk produced, on an emergency basis, provisional ballots for each of the towns in Middlesex County, delivered them to the appropriate clerk's office to be disseminated to the polling locations. The issue was is that the printer didn't have the corresponding barcode that was read by ES&S by the tabulator. So if we were to put it into the machine, you wouldn't recognize, because the barcode tells you what.
Did this affect all of them? All of those in that
All
class?
those paper provisional ballots that were given out on election day by the county clerk to the municipal clerk. So if used, and again, the same process that we kind of outlined before, they fill out the certificate, they fill out the paper provisional ballot as they did in previous elections. The issue for us would be is we wouldn't be able to put them through the tabulator in a consistent way with which we've been counting ballots and other provisionals.
Right.
So the suggestion from the county clerk to us would be is do what you do for remakes and just remake those ballots onto ones that actually have the barcode on the outside and then read them as such. So what we would do for remakes and for commissioners who are not as familiar with the process is that we would just have a Democrat and Republican, one with the ballot, one with the remake, and they would actually go through and transfer the selections onto a remake ballot. And again, having one ballot that is the remake and one is the optimal, and then run the remake through the machine. And again, that could be observed by challengers and anyone as such as we move forward, but that would be the clerk's ask for consistency of reporting the results and having those particular ballots all grouped together.
Do we have any estimate of how many there were? Now, I know it's not exactly the same issue of what's inside the envelope, because there could be some idea of how many were ultimately distributed and how many are left, so we could have some idea. But we probably don't.
But again, that would require, again, it's the similar thing. You won't know until it's actually physically opened.
Well,
Total provisionals are how much? What we get?
What's that?
Total provisional ballots that we have?
A little less than
10,000.
11,000.
A little less than 11,000. But we don't really know how many paper provisional ballots
As
ultimately
opposed
got
to
to
the
any
machine.
polling places. It wasn't in the, like 25
And again,
by the afternoon.
yeah, I mean, we would begin to know
Okay.
that tonight in
That
terms
is
of which
fine.
ones are cards and which ones are the other two apparatuses. So again, just seeking your, if you want to say, approval or acquiescence that staff would begin, if there are those ballots in question, that we would transfer the results with a Democratic and Republican ballot opener, or if you wanted particular staff, you can have staff do that as well. If the commissioners want to do that, they can do that as well. To be able to transfer the results from one ballot to the other, and then it would be read into the tabulator, so all the results are of a similar kind. Yes, ma'am.
Did not the machine-generated provisional go into the actual voting machine?
Yes?
Yes.
If everything worked perfectly,
Yes.
I would get a provisional, it goes into the machine.
Yes.
Did any of the provisionals that were received by the voters in our county go into the machine?
Yes.
And those are counted?
They will be counted.
Assuming they're otherwise.
That does not go into the count on the machine?
No,
It comes
they will
out.
go- Those will go through, those will
It
go
goes
through the
out
machine
separately,
as well.
even though it goes in the machine?
Yes.
Comes out.
It comes out and it goes into the certificate. And again, there are those, you can see them in through the,
Good.
through it. I mean, you can't really see anything in it, but you can see the framework.
No, I don't want, yes, good, okay. Just want to make sure that that part worked, so we don't have double voting.
So my question is, make sure that we're under a tight time constraint, or I'll call it tight because you have to certify the election.
Sure.
And we're still looking at these ballots. We will need as many people as, if we decide to go with non-staff or a Democrat or Republican, we would need, I would think, a fair amount of staff for later in the week to remake these ballots. Would that be correct?
don't
Yeah,
know.
potentially in terms of remix, in terms of staff.
Well, let me just ask a
Go ahead.
question.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I thought you were finished.
No, I'm trying to get some answers.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it would depend again on how many there actually are, but it could require a fair amount of staff to be able to do that. So again, if it's the commissioner's suggestion or guidance that we should use exclusively board staff, we would do that. If you're comfortable with the ballot openers, a Democrat, Republican fulfilling that obligation, we can have staff oversee that
I'm more
process.
comfortable with our own staff
Okay.
that is employed by the county, and I would volunteer, depending when it would do it, I think that some of you in the commissioners should volunteer to do some of this too. So that if they're, again, time available, I think that's something that all hands on deck for this.
Okay.
What was worked on this
Commissioner
morning?
Katz, you were next.
Yeah.
Only open?
I would, I agree with Commissioner Franco in terms of, I don't want the ballot openers to do this. So it would be our permanent staff. And what do we think about the seasonals?
No, it's staff.
No, I know, we have full-time staff, we have a certain number, and we also have a certain number of seasonals, which for the audience and the commissioners are people that we hired for a period of time that are either part-timers or for a period of months that they're established employees, but they're not full-time.
I would defer to our chief clerk on this one, okay, because I think she has a handle on it.
We've had the ballot openers remake ballots before. You have them here, there's 100 people sitting around. We guide them, we supervise them, they're a DNR, and they will remake a ballot under our guidance. So we've had the seasonals do that are hired for ballot opening.
Under your guidance, does our staff look at both the new and old one that they remade?
But that's what they do. A Democrat and Republican sit together. They have a ballot that they're remaking onto another ballot.
Right, of having it.
We're marking this one remake one, we're marking this one remake one. So if you wanted to look at it, we can tell where it came from. Well, we're not going to look at every single one because that's what they're here to do.
But we really have a limited number that they have to remake, generally, correct?
Yes.
Okay. This could be a lot more. And I'm not.
You don't have a full-time staff to do that.
No, I know, but what about the question was, what about our seasonals?
That are at the office, the seasonals at the office, or the seasonals that are here for opening?
It doesn't matter. Our seasonal employees, the Republican and Democrat.
They could be used, yes.
Yeah. I mean, that would also be acceptable to me. It would not be acceptable, especially on this potential scale of this, that our ballot openers do that, personally.
If that's what you want, then we'll make that happen.
Go ahead, make a motion.
Yeah, no.
But can I just say one thing, just keep in mind, we're not going to know until we open the ballot. So the ballot's going to be here, you're going to have the seasonals that you have ballot openers, then we have to compile all those, will have to be remade and have to be done at another time to get those other seasonals over here. Just keep that in mind.
There's so many problems, there's so many issues, we just have to deal with what we can deal with as best as we can to keep the integrity of the process to the extent that we can keep the integrity of the process, and to try to minimize the damage that has been done in this election. Right? I move that to the extent we have provisional ballots that are not otherwise bar-coded so they can be counted on the machine, that we allow them to be remade consistent with our methodology of remaking other ballots when that's necessary, but it only be done by either our permanent staff or by our seasonal employees, with one Republican and one Democrat in connection to each ballot in the process. That's the motion.
Do we have a second? Don, did you want to say
I want
something?
to second, but I want to discuss one. Let her second. I just want to discuss one thing. You can second.
Okay.
Okay, so I'd just like to make sure, just a little bit, I know you said Democrat, Republican, if we have independents.
No, we don't. We should not have any seasoning. Go ahead.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Please let me finish, okay? If there is, since there was, if there is, okay, I want to just And I don't think there may not, there isn't? Okay, then there isn't. And the only thing to add to that is that I would like to make this reviewed at our next meeting, like to have this reviewed at our next, the motion be also be reviewed at our next meeting in case we have to adjust depending on what we find out.
What are we reviewing? There's lots of things we have to
The
review.
remaking.
The remaking of the ballot. Just because we don't know, this is an unknown this is totally an
Yes.
unknown for us. To make it and leave it the way it is, I just want to be able to say we can go back and look at this at our next, at our next meeting, which would be on
The formal meeting or our next meeting?
Formal
is
meeting.
the- is
Well,
the
your
Friday.
next meeting is
Meeting
Friday.
on the
Friday,
15th?
meeting on
Friday.
Friday,
Friday.
The 12th,
the 12th.
but I also have,
15th this month.
So
Well,
there's,
but we're not going to be opening any of those ballots until Friday morning, right? When the ballot openers are back. So we won't discover, if we're the only ones we're doing now are open, right? And I guess if there's any in Old Bridge, I don't know if they were issued, that could come up now. But if they're not, we won't know in terms of doing this until their ballots are opened on Friday morning. So we can do that, but I'm not sure what,
Okay.
I just don't know what report, I mean, we absolutely positively have to review what we're doing, et cetera. I'm just not sure exactly what you have in mind and how.
I just want to be able to review, so motion
Okay.
with review, that's all I want to
open
get
the
at,
month,
review.
we open
Perfectly.
in the morning and we review at 4 o'clock.
Right.
Okay, I accept that as a friendly amendment. You don't need to modify the second or whatever it is, that's fine.
Who seconded it? Hi, Commissioner Love? Oh, Commissioner Benjamin? Okay, roll call, Mayor.
Chairman Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Franklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Katz?
Yes.
Commissioner Moskowitz?
yes?
Commissioner Jallo?
Aye.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes.
Do you want to transition to Monroe provisional bags at this point?
Can't hear
Do you want to do a transition to Monroe provisional bag?
Yeah.
We could do it in any order, but we do have to, I guess we do, you're going to want some more guidance in terms of the emergency ballots and other circumstances. We can do that afterwards. I'm certainly happy most of these folks here are from Monroe.
Yes.
And I'm assuming they're here for this, in terms of
I
this issue, so I'm happy to do that.
As situations determine, again, you might be here for a while, we can kind of revisit those situations as we go forward. Those are the most two pressing in terms of what we would do this evening. So again, for the Monroe provisional ballot bags, I put in front of you, each of you a packet in terms of, just again, the totals of provisionals by each ballot bag. And again, that was reviewed by staff. The second page would be the actual seal numbers for each of the provisional bags for that was at the polling location each day, and you can see the signatures of poll workers. And then the corresponding sheets that, I'll kind of do this as an example. So, and this is kind of, can I clean that back up here? I don't want to bring it forward. I know we're able to kind of have it work out. So again, these were initially the ballot that was used by the clerk. So each of the bags had the appropriate paperwork in them. You also kind of have this kind of cover sheet here in each of these. So there's 3 seals in question. One would be the slot, which is this one right here, and this one's basically so you can snap it out. And again, this is not one of the bags. This is just for demonstration purposes. So again, you would just push that out. So that the actual physical provisionals could go into the slot here. Again, this is not the actual bag. You can see it's kind of already been broken, but I put it back on for demonstration purposes. There's a red seal over the actual physical zipper to the bag. And then, so if it's broken, you can see it says voided. And then actually it also has a blue seal, which is also in there. So that gives you access to the physical bag as well. So those are the 3 seals in question. And then there are 3 provisional bags from Monroe that were unsealed. Unfortunately, they're the only 3 in the county that came back unsealed. It's just unfortunate. And then
corresponding seals, which were kind of voided on each one. You can see for each of the locations, it'll said the blue and red seal on each of the 3 bags was disturbed. So the blue side and the red tape on all 3 bags were.
What am I looking at here? I mean, what is this?
So
I see that, so I see it has the location, and I see it's signed by
Signed by
Monroe.
So this
What
is-
is that, what is that done?
this is what's physically here.
In the bags as they come in.
In the bag or on the bag?
It's on the bag.
So
Sleeve,
is
there's
that,
a sleeve there.
is that what the poll clerks, before they remove it from the polling place, 2 poll clerks sign it and put it on there?
Yeah, well, that's on there, and then you have the accompanying seal kind of information,
Right.
which they also kind of verify.
And I have one here, like, one of the 3 locations that the bags came back unsealed. So this is Monroe Clearbrook Cultural Center. And one of the poll clerks wrote, no plastic seal, no plastic seal and zipper not closed. So the poll clerk, at least one poll clerk noted that. So was it broken? Do we know, is that broken or not here?
We do not know how it broke throughout the day, but again, all these bags arrive in the location, and the seals at the beginning of the day is that these
Yes,
bags
but
arrive.
which seal are we talking about here?
Again, on all 3 bags, the blue and the red, on all 3 bags, the access to the zipper was
The red
broken.
seal.
All seals were
Yes.
Yeah, so the red tape was broken, so was the blue seal, which was the appropriate zipper.
So the only seal throughout the day that should be touched is the blue seal to open up the slot.
Yeah.
And then what you saw there was the red seal, that's what's supposed to go on at the end of the day. So it comes back to a seal here, and this is never touched. And again, it says do not touch red tape. It's been covered in the training, ad nauseum.
Well, let me go back to this. We had 3 bags. Which seal, were all bags had no seals on them? Not the
all
ones that
3 bags.
the clerk was supposed to put them in, and not the ones that were not supposed to be touched?
All 3 bags had the
Red
red
seals.
tape and the blue seal broken that would be associated with the zipper.
And they came
Which
back,
ones? In other words, the way they were delivered and they weren't supposed to be touched?
back
Yeah.
here.
So again,
Not
just
there.
for highlighting, view on the zipper side, which I just showed you would be the
Got that
blue
right.
blue seal,
Down
which
there,
is on
they
the
were
zipper,
fine.
and then the red tape, which covered
Well,
it.
we don't know if they were.
Yes,
Again, it's kind of a-
yes, we do know if they were
Please do
fine.
not touch that.
You know that they were
Right.
fine.
And they were
They left
And they
here.
were broken.
They left here fine. The question is whether in transit.
What's that? The
Commissioner
3
Brackett.
bags require transit.
3 bags, and that seal is broken.
And that seal was broken all through.
So we know definitively the bag was delivered on election day with seals intact, is that correct?
Correct. And then again, there are instructions if the bag is not sealed, to contact the Board of Elections
So when
immediately.
they got their election day, 5:15, unless they called us, we're assuming the seals are on.
Yes.
They're actually instructed to call the county clerk.
Right.
The phone number's on
Right.
it.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Because again, it's the provision of the county
Right.
clerk to be able to provide this.
Commissioner Cash, did you want to say something? No.
Not right this
Commissioner
minute.
Moskowitz?
No, just to clarify.
We have to reject.
Okay, I'll talk. No one else is going to mention it. For the benefit of the new commissioners and the audience and such, it has been the consistent policy of the board that if the provisional ballot bag, box, whatever, comes back with broken seals, there is a potential chain of custody issue about the ballots inside the bag. And we have it's been our consistent position to reject them. It has also been our consistent position that the poll clerks that are responsible for the bags and the seals not being there be, punished is the perhaps punished,
Reprimanded.
reprimanded or more regarding this. And just for comparison, it is very odd that all three bags were in the same town, but they don't, the people didn't necessarily talk with each other. But we've had instances where in the same, we have the same number of districts, et cetera, we've had 26 or 20, almost 30 bags that have come back on other elections that have been unsealed. So on a minor basis, it's better. It's not good in any way, shape, or form because it means we are disenfranchising the voters that voted, not because anything the voter has done, but something that the people that work for us as election officials have done. So we have to reject it, but we have to do something with the public works.
Yes, if you can.
In the form of a motion?
That'll be a motion.
What,
You
to reject them all?
Yes.
Is the motion to
Make a
reject
motion first,
all
and then it's
public
open for whatever discussion the
Yes.
chair chooses.
the motion to reject? Real nice.
Yes, based on,
Based on the bullshit in Monroe.
no, based on.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's based on, I don't like it, because I do not, I'm very unhappy that people's votes will be, that people will be disenfranchised, voters will be disenfranchised because of errors by people who are working essentially as temporary election officials, our poll workers. I'm very unhappy with that. But the security of the ballots is an even more important factor, at least it has been determined by the board over any number of years, that it's a more important factor on it. But I'm not happy, but yes, I'm making that motion, and this is not a variant, this is consistent with everything that we've done on these things since we first had that issue arise, which is, I guess, since we first had provisional ballots.
Even when we had the bags?
Even when we had the bags.
Is there a
But we
second?
need a second before discussion.
Second, and then we'll have discussion.
And I have a question.
Commissioner Moss, for a second, I don't know if
I'll
you're seconding.
Want a second?
I'll second,
But
but
you
I do
have,
have a
you
question.
want to speak too? Do you have something you want to say?
Has there been any explanation given from the poll workers? Were there direct calls made as to why we received them?
The call I received was on election night from the clerk, when she notified me that there were bags that came back unsealed.
And she knows which polling area?
She knew immediately which
And
location.
she will be looking into specifics?
We should, again, jointly, we kind of do this as a post-election kind of, we do this as kind of a post-election, we kind of work with the clerks, and
Of course.
we interview the poll workers and kind of get their side, and then we bring that back to you for determination of how to address them as poll workers going forward.
We have the public has to speak later. Sorry.
After the vote?
No. No, I think we should allow the public to speak before we vote.
Thank you.
I agree.
But if there's other commissioners that want, if any other commission, in my view, if other commissioners want to give their opinion, that's probably appropriate, and so everybody knows where we, at least not necessarily where we stand, but what comments on it, and let the public before we.
The chairman can choose whichever order
Yes.
she likes.
Since so many people
make
have
a
come
motion?
from Monroe, I think we
The
should-
motion was
Time out,
made
time
and it
out,
was
time out.
seconded.
Sylvia, hold on. There's a motion on the table, correct? And there's a second.
Yes.
Are the commissioners done discussing this?
Yes.
Okay, so then there's a motion and a second. We should vote on the motion.
If you're going to vote on a motion without having the audience speak before it's voted, I withdraw the motion.
Okay.
You need a second.
No, you don't need a second to withdraw a motion.
That's correct. Sorry, it is correct.
Okay?
So if you, before we have a motion to do this, I would request through the chair that we allow the public to speak on the topic. And then I'll make a motion after that.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to allow the public to speak.
Roll call, Maria?
Chairman Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Franklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Katz?
Yes.
Commissioner Moskowitz?
Yes.
Commissioner Jallo?
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes.
Piero.
Thank you. I just, I
State
appreciate
your
the,
name, please.
Charles DePiero, Monroe Township, 404 Spotswood, Gravel Hill. I just want to thank the board first for allowing us to speak. But my question would be, the people that voted, they have no idea if their vote's counted or not, unless they go to the county website that says cast your vote, track your vote. So are these people going to get the opportunity to vote again? Are they going to be notified that their vote did not count? And that's where I really the break in this process. And we all went through problems every election day, but this one was the worst that I've seen. After all the money that we spent and the procedure that we followed, our town was a hot mess. And we have a lot of senior population, including myself. I was just 61 on Friday, so I'm in this group. And I got to tell you, a lot of our poll workers are up in age, and they don't follow the normal process, and they're used to the old system and the old style, and dealing with it is very difficult. So I just want to know if these people are going to be notified that their vote didn't count, and are they going to get a second opportunity to do it right? And thank you again.
Commissioner Slate?
No, I'd like to just respond. I understand certainly what you're saying. However, this year in particular, because of the new materials that we had, every poll worker, not just new ones, needed to be retrained. These particular bags that have the seals on them, we have used before for a number of years, so it's not that they would be new to anybody. But I understand your point for the voter part of it. I would feel devastated. That's why I was so concerned about the two persons I spoke with who had completely different experiences. However, if the votes have been given to us inappropriately or illegally or whatever the term might be, we cannot, in good judgment, accept them at this point, in my opinion. Apologize.
Could you repeat that again, Commissioner Moskowitz? I didn't hear the last sentence.
I just said I do apologize, but in all good sense, we did not receive them the way legally we needed to. We do not know what happened with that, and that's why we have those provisions.
Go ahead.
Chairman, there's another.
Oh, sorry.
Well, you all finished answering Mr. DiPiero? Okay. I'm Melody Henry, and I live at 264A Glen Road in Monroe Township. And as Charlie said, thank you all for being here and allowing us to speak. The first thing I want to say is, Commissioner Katz, you mentioned that consistency, that's been the way you did things consistently through the years, and I respect that. However, I must tell you, this was the most unorthodox election I've ever been involved in. There were so many defects and infractions that we were going crazy. It was like a fire drill everywhere we went that day. I was a challenger, and I couldn't keep up with it from 6 in the morning till 8 at night. And even after that, some of our workers didn't get back in till 10:30, 11 because of all the different deviations. I spent the whole day with Kevin Wright, who I hope and pray you will talk to, you will investigate, audit, whatever the words are, because the defects that we were running with in Monroe were astronomical, to the point where three of our computers had different databases running at the same time, and none of our people could be found. I sat there listening to one resident tell me she voted in this location for 17 years and never had a problem. Now they couldn't find her in any of the 3 computers, not one of them. So they forced her to vote provisionally, and now you're telling me her vote wouldn't be counted. I'll tell you another one, my very good friend who was a poll worker there, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with our databases, so Kevin asked him to make his vote on the machine, And when he did, he goes, oh, it's not working. I guess you'll have to vote provisionally. So he voted provisionally, and that's a second ballot that won't get counted. So I can tell you stories over and over between Rossmore and Clearbrook and Oak Tree. The rooms were this big, the lines were triple deep, all the way from the beginning of the room to the end of the room. The people were waiting an hour and a half. We had to bring in chairs for them to sit because they're seniors. They're 60, 70, 80, and 90 years old, and they couldn't even stand. Many of them left and went home. They didn't even vote. And I'll tell you something else. I get there, and all the signs on the doors said closed. So people didn't even go in to vote. They just left. They never even made it in. So there were so many abnormalities, and I wonder who's in charge of taking care of the signs that say this way to the polling place. There were none. I circled Oak Tree 4 times before I figured out where the door was to get in. So there were no signs. So this was, I mean, there was so many things wrong. There were 2 people in the polling booth at the same time. I'm like, wait a minute, that's not allowed. You know, there were 2 of the same party sitting at one table. That's not allowed. One of the places I walked in where the provisional box was, there's a woman having a conversation with the worker. And I said, who are you? She wasn't a voter, and she wasn't a poll worker. She was just socializing with her friend who's getting paid to work. So I said, you need to leave. You are not allowed to be here. This is a polling place. But nobody knew the rules. You say they were trained. Okay, some of us have been around for 5, 6, 10 years. We might know the rules, but these people did not know the rules. I had one poll worker tell the people, you can't cross lines. You either vote A or B, but you can't cross. I'm like, no, what are you doing? You can't do that. I am telling you, it was a farce. It just saddened me so much to see that this is our American way, because there was nothing American about it. So I know, Mr. Katz, that you're saying consistency. There was nothing consistent about this election, and to turn those votes away is really very, very sad, and you really need to, I really beseech you to rethink it. Thank you.
Want to speak?
Thank you for letting us speak before you vote. It's sad. It's sad that this is going on. You know what? She's right, Don. Consistency doesn't hold water in this election. Okay? You want to disenfranchise how many voters compared to, you know, all these voters yet. Do we not have any idea how many are in these bags?
Yes, we can count, so we can each of the bags.
And how many?
It's on the packet.
86, 65, and 30, in 3 different
Who's
locations.
the mathematician here? About how much does that add up to?
65,
It's almost
30,
100.
90.
Three counts. 86 in one poll, 65 in another, and 30 in another.
181.
Okay, so 181 people, their ballots aren't going to be counted. And you're right, in Monroe, where half of them are probably, I would think, 70 and over, voted all their lives as part of this American way, and you're going to tell them no? Who do you think is going to be more upset? The person who got to vote or the 181 who didn't get to vote? You know what? Think outside the box this time, please. And I do question who signed for these ballots. I'm going to ask. There's one poll worker who was working the provisional. She should have even been in that building. She has a lawsuit against her from one of the candidates. So they have a candidate in Ward 2 who has a lawsuit, an open lawsuit regarding with a poll worker who was sitting at the table with her friend, the other Democrat poll worker, for 6 hours before I got there. So then she goes over to the provisional table. And you got it in writing, some of you. She now tells the people, and she's not new at this. She knows darn well what goes on. Then she tells the people, here, give me a ballot, I'll seal the thing for you. I want to know who signed the little box thing at Brookside School. And if these votes get discounted, is there recourse for a recount? How long do these provisionals stay on record or in safekeeping? How long do these, so that would be the first question. How long do they stay in safekeeping? Because if these are rejected, there should definitely be a suit to recount in Monroe Township, the only township who had 3 boxes. This is not consistent. You might have got a box from one town over the years. You get 3 boxes from one town. You know, I don't know what that says, but it calls for a recount if these are rejected. It stinks. And I want to know who signed those papers, because if it's any of them that have a lawsuit against them from a candidate, they should be they should be brought up on other charges or never be a poll worker again. They should never have been in that place or at the provisional table. So I beseech you again, this is not a consistent year. Okay, think outside the box. You're disenfranchising 181 people here. People, and you know Monroe seniors who have, that's their, one, is their social event to go out to vote. And 2, that's their right that they worked for the veterans over. And this will come. How many veterans are disenfranchised in this thing who fought for this right to vote? Don't do it, folks. You let every vote count. Good, bad, Republican, Democrat. Don't do it. Every vote counts.
Ma'am, would you like to speak? No. Anybody else on this issue? Charlie?
Yes, thanks. I just want to be clear, this is only to discuss the Monroe
Just
issue?
this, yes.
And there'll be another public comment session at the end? Okay. I just wanted to build on my prior statements and thank everyone for coming out and having this dialogue here, because unfortunately this reinforces the narrative that I was trying to get across, that early voting was a success, but Election Day was a total disaster. A confluence of multiple problems that compounded each other. As we saw, there's probably a higher than normal number of provisionals because of the failure of the election equipment to do its job, the job that taxpayers paid millions to get. And I do want to ask for the record,
Can we stick with Monroe?
Sure. Is there a representative of the county clerk's office here to speak on this?
No.
Is there a representative of ES&S, the voting machine company? No. Okay. That's got to change.
That does not relate to the unsealed ballot boxes, Charlie.
Well, I think both of those folks have some culpability, wasn't it?
Clearly they have
Later
other
on,
issues.
you're going to have more discussion.
Sure. And I'll speak again at the end, but I just want to say that, I'm shocked to hear that provisionals were not, paper provisionals were not available. As you mentioned, it's a fail-safe. You're supposed to have that in case something goes wrong. Something went wrong and we didn't have it, and the county clerk isn't here to explain it, and there's no, I don't understand. So they printed these things out in the morning and started printing them in the morning? Is that what happened?
Probably even later than that.
Oh my God. Well, they should have had them at every polling place, before, and that seems like a major failure that needs to be addressed. So I just wanted to make that point, and I'll leave it at that. I do, for the record, my math's here, 151 is the number of ballots in the 3 bags, 151, right?
Is it 151 or 180? Because I'm reading the newspaper as we speak.
151 is my math.
You go to night school today, so it's dark outside.
Am I wrong?
It's 181.
181.
86, 35, and 30?
86, 65,
Oh,
and 30.
65. I apologize. I had the wrong number. Okay. Well, thank you. That's all on this matter.
So again, Monroe is the only town in this county that has 3 bags, that has their bags rejected.
Okay, we have a motion.
Is that?
We have a motion.
I'll make the motion, but I also want to talk.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'll make the same motion I made before, but I have a couple of comments. One, I've been involved in the election process since at least 1970. I attended my first recount since
What does that have to do with this
19... Wait.
election?
I attended my first recount in 1970. This election was an abomination. No question about it. There were many, many, many different problems. A major part of it was the technology and such, all right? Some of the things that were mentioned by your audience were things that we should have known about during Election Day to the extent we could have corrected it. Now, almost all of those some typical problems that we have every year were subsumed by the major failure in terms of I'll just say the technology. And I will acknowledge that because of that, the phone lines were jammed over that, so we probably didn't get some of those calls that they were made. But if we did get them, we would have tried to correct them then. Getting it after the election is over is good to try to correct going forward, but it doesn't allow us to try to correct the thing on the ground at that point. And I understand why not, because you couldn't get through if you called, I don't know. But that's what it is. The security issue is imperative. I've been fighting voter fraud for longer than that. All right? And by the way, a few years ago in Sayreville, I think there were more than 3 ballot bags that were unsealed. That ended up in an election contest as well. So this is not something new. This is not something new.
This is something very new, Don. When in your whole 40 years did you have 3 boxes deemed invalid? From one town.
Okay, well, Anita Greenberg, I assume is upstairs, is calling you. I move that we reject the ballots in the ballot bags that came back to us unsealed because of the lack of the elimination of the chain of custody for the ballots. And it's based on, as I said before, our consistent practice on this. But our consistent practice is also some punishment in some manner for the poll clerks who did this, who disenfranchised the voters.
So we give them their phone number to call them?
Yes.
Sounds like 2 seconds.
I don't want that part
Okay.
of the motion. I'm going to reject that. I don't want to be discussing
Then you make a motion.
punishment.
Then you make a motion.
According to
Then you make the
rules
motion.
and laws, we
You-
need to reject any
Wait a minute,
ballots.
let's have one at a time.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
I move that we have to reject the ballot bags that came in inappropriate and open, unsealed is the term, as required. We need to have these bags sealed. We cannot justify the ballots as having been safely returned to us. I vote that we reject them.
You move it.
That's the motion?
Yes.
Second.
Second.
And I'll just add that Monroe, from Monroe.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. Monroe.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Don?
Roll call, Maria.
Chairman Engel.
I cannot reject this motion. I cannot accept this motion simply because I can't see us with 80-year-old poll workers being chastised for this. So, no.
Commissioner Frankel.
Is this,
sorry, I'm sorry.
This is a motion to reject the bags.
Bags only. This is the bags only.
Related to
The
the
bags.
bags, not related to the
Right,
poll
this is the
clerks.
bag
Nothing
only.
to do with the ballots?
No,
Well,
the
we're rejecting the bags,
and
and
the
Dustin's going to
ballots.
reject the ballots.
The bags and the ballots, not the poll workers. This is only to reject the 3 bags that came back from Monroe that were chain of custody was broken. Nothing to do with the poll. This has nothing to do with the poll workers. We'll talk about poll workers at another time.
I'm voting to accept them.
Commissioner Frankel.
Just want to make sure. The motion is to reject these ballots. Is that correct?
Based on,
Based on the motion and
You
second.
just made
Based
the
on the motion and second. I vote to reject the ballots.
Commissioner Katz.
reluctantly, I vote to reject the ballots.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yes.
Commissioner Jallo.
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin.
No.
Thank you, ladies. So the question is, how long are these things kept? If there's a recount, how long are these things kept?
Linda, do you know?
So we can go to vote. Can we keep to our,
Yeah, well, we're still on
If
Commissioner.
there's a lawsuit,
I will
how
ask
long?
her in a second.
Thank you.
Commissioner comments?
Well, there was a concern regarding a possible recount, and the question came to me or the board, how long do we keep the ballots intact? How long are these kept even though
2
they're
years.
rejected?
2 years.
2 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments for Commissioner?
To just clarify that further, it's an excess, whatever the time, we deal with 2 years, is in excess of the time by which you have to file for a recount and in excess of the time in which you have to file for an election contest.
17 days, I believe, isn't it? 17 days for a recount.
I believe it's 17 days. I think
Is
it's
there any
30 days.
further comments?
No comments? Comments? Here, okay.
No?
No.
All right. Public comment. Yeah, I guess everybody spoke.
Oh, may I?
Yeah.
Thank you for taking my comments. I just want to tell you that during the day, it was about till 12:30 in the afternoon before Clearbrook resolved what the issue was with the databases that did not have correct data running on them. So most of the people who voted, they couldn't vote. When they went up to the machines, they couldn't be found. So they were told to vote provisionally. So most of these people who should have been in that database, because there were 2 different databases running. One was called Clearbrook, one was called Clarabrook. One had District 10, one had District 6, 7, 8, and 9. The data was all, I'm going to say corrupt for lack of any other word. But they come up to these machines, it caused the long lines, but they weren't found at all. There were people who weren't found in any of those databases. So they were forced to vote provisionally. So I understand with the seals being broken. I even think they probably did it intentionally so they didn't get counted. But my point is, these people deserve to have those votes counted. They had no choice, because those machines were so corrupt. And they could not fix it. From 6 in the morning till 12:30, we didn't even know what the issue was. So this was so abnormal. And I don't think you understand the extent of it. You know, these people really didn't have a choice. Thank you, that's all I can say.
As Melanie said, we did follow it up through emails to Tom and his staff and to some of the board members that were on the emails that Tom gave us. But getting back to my question, that 181 people, is this board going to notify them that their votes didn't count? Because I think you guys should.
What is the procedure on that? Because we're
I don't know. You've been on long enough.
We don't usually, I don't think. Do we not?
No, we don't usually.
No, all right, because I was...
That's why I asked what we did. Or
Right, they
how we
should, they have the right to
We're
know.
not usually notified.
I believe they have the right to know. I was in the building in 11 Kennedy Boulevard for 3 days in 2019 when this whole fiasco was for Sayreville. And I sat there and you guys said, the same, majority of the same people on the board said, well, if this ever happens to the poll workers, then we're going to reprimand them. Now I hear it again in 2021 that they're going to go back to the poll workers and blame the poll workers. And I'm in charge of the poll workers in Monroe. And it's not an easy task because you're dealing with people that don't have email addresses, people that don't have cell phones. You got to go to their homes and talk to them. And our community consists of 50,000 residents with over 30,000 being seniors. And as I said before, I'm one of them. It's very difficult to get them with the COVID and everything that they're dealing with. And I just can't say it enough as the chair of Monroe Township and a resident for 61 years. I believe that those 181 people should get something from this board or the Board of Election that says your vote did not count. That's all I'm going to say. That's just my opinion. I just want to thank the board for their time.
I would follow up with that, not just notify them, allow them to vote. Vote any way you figure out, paper ballot or whatever, but they need to cast their vote. That was unfair that they had it stolen from them. Thank you.
Charlie.
We have any more business?
No, he's going up to some hole for commissioners that are upstairs.
We're going to go upstairs soon?
He's coming down.
Okay, you can go.
All right, Charlie, you're reading from waiting.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to second what Mr. DiPiero said, that I do feel the voters who were disenfranchised should be notified. It's not a pleasant notification to make, but we need to face these realities. We need to be honest with people. And if their ballots were rejected, they should be notified. I think as a matter of course, if you're doing any sort of provisional ballot, you should get something back to tell you if it counted or not, rather than leaving you in suspense or leaving the onus on the voter to check. But I do want to ask, whose idea was it to use the electronic voting machines for provisionals and why? What's the advantage to having the machine do the provisional as opposed to doing it the way it's been done for decades and just have paper ballots that folks fill out a certification, put it in an envelope, and then they're dealt with by the board? Why get the voting machines involved at all in provisional ballots?
Does anybody
May
want
I
to
answer
answer?
that? I want people to, as to the provisionals, that part of it, there should have been paper provisionals in the polls as a backup on it. But the use of the machines to do the provisionals is actually is a methodology that avoids disenfranchising any number of voters, because to the extent it worked, right? To the extent it worked, the ballots were printed with the way the voters wanted them to vote. One, they could not overvote. If they could not overvote, their ballot, that vote they cannot overvote if it was done that way. They could on a paper ballot, so that vote would not have been counted. They cannot mark the ballot in which we would have to reject it, where their vote would be not counted. This way, it's on there, it's get counted. There's at least 2 or 3 ways where, to the extent the system worked, it avoided having to disqualify voters for mistakes that they would not be allowed to, that they could make on a paper ballot, but they could not make if the system worked properly.
That's intended to cut down on rejection.
But the key part to that is we should also have had the paper ballots there to take care as a fail-safe, which is what they were intended to be.
That wouldn't affect any of this.
No.
And so I want to ask how the process works when it does work. I didn't vote provisionally. Does the machine give you back the ballot and then you put the ballot in the provisional envelope just like a paper provisional?
Yeah, you fold it and put it in
The
the
ballot the machine essentially is only used as a printing device.
Right. It doesn't go in
I could liken it to a typewriter or something where you type.
A what?
Typewriter or a computer or a printer. Or a printer.
Okay. And so the same problem that was plaguing the poll books also prevented some of the machines from doing this. Is that fair to say?
No, that's not fair to say.
No,
Okay,
the problem was before the poll. It wasn't at the poll itself, it was with the computers, the databases.
It was not, this particular thing, as far as I can tell, subject to further things, was not a election machine issue. It was a e-poll book issue.
Well, power.
Right.
Or a connectivity issue.
That's what I read.
Right. Because the poll books kept trying to download the data
Correct.
repeatedly
Correct.
at 3,400 locations around the state, hitting the same server. So were they supposed to do that? Were the e-poll books supposed to download that information for when every voter checked in, or was that a mistake?
I have no idea whether it was a mistake, but so far as to what I know, it was not necessary to be done once the initial data was downloaded through it.
Right, because voters can only go to their assigned location.
There were also other reasons to leave it on if that was not a problem.
Okay. Maybe Mr. Lynch would know, but has a judge granted any order with regard to the emergency ballots? I know there was discussion last time about him asking a judge for that. Not sure.
Any request that we make has to go through our Attorney General. The Attorney General has not made any request as of yet.
Understood. Okay, so,
All right, we've got 3 more minutes.
okay, thank you. I guess I'm just going to summarize a few of the reports I read. Home News has an article, Problems with Voting Machines Reported Throughout Middlesex County. It names 5 communities, South Plainfield, Old Bridge, South River, Monroe, and Edison, experienced technological issues with electronic poll books. South Plainfield, 13 of 15 polling districts were inoperable for several hours Tuesday morning. Is that an accurate report? Is that fair to say? That there were, those issues in those towns?
I think Administrator Lynch has the list exactly. We don't have that right here in front of us.
Okay. Well, I'm anxiously hoping to get some of this information because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And like I said last time, I just want to get to the bottom of it. I want to find out what the extent of the problems were, where they were, how many towns were affected, how many counties were affected, and what equipment failed us. I think that's, we should all want to get to the bottom of it. Piscataway, it was reported provisional ballots were not available on site. This is tap into Piscataway. And then, quote, there were also reports of incorrect public questions displaying at some voting locations. It says the board was notified and later updated the machines. Is that true? Is there any accuracy to that?
I'd have to ask the administrator.
Okay, well, hopefully he'll have a minute for me after the meeting adjourns. Metuchen posted on their Facebook page for the borough saying, in particular, there were some software issues at both Campbell and Edgar locations resulting in a number of people who showed up but did not vote. That is what happened. I know the member from Metuchen's not here at the moment, but is that fair to say that there were software issues, or was it something else?
There were connectivity issues. Okay. I can't say this enough. You've heard it from us many times. It's connectivity.
Not the software.
Connectivity.
Okay. I'm just saying that's from the Borough of Metuchen's Facebook page, so I'm just trying to verify what I'm hearing. Highland Park posted on their Facebook page, said issues resulted in slower than normal voting times. Fair to say that happened according to a lot of sources I spoke to. Mayor of Dunellen, he uses the word connectivity. He says connectivity issues are causing constant reboots of the system in order to reconnect, therefore taking longer than average to vote, causing long lines. That's accurate, fair to say? Connectivity issues led to the long lines.
Whatever he says, I'm telling you, connectivity issues.
Right, it caused long lines.
That's what he says. We don't know if they cause long lines.
Okay. And then, most troubling, Jackie Palmer, Mayor of Spotswood, sent a letter to Mr. Lynch. I'm not sure if you've seen the letter, but I encourage you to read it. She identified 3 big issues. 1, early morning connectivity problems caused significant wait times and errors in the poll books where registered voters in the borough could not be found. I think we heard some similar testimony tonight from the Monroe folks. Number 2, paper jams with the new machines caused significant interruptions to operations.
3 minutes are up, Charlie.
Okay, and then the third one I'll tell you later. But can you just tell me those things happened? Is that true, paper jams? And people not being able to be found in the books?
These are questions that the administrator got to answer. We weren't at the polls. The calls came into him.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I'll follow up.
Motion to adjourn?
No, we can't adjourn.
Oh, no, that's right. They're coming down.
If you need me to fill some time, I'm happy to keep going.
No.
far they are along
They're still
upstairs?
looking at the woodland. They don't have any challenge ballots at the moment. They seem pretty content just to see what we did.
Yeah, but we have to be here for any challenge ballots.
So again,
So they could be here
How
for
far along are they in terms of the number of ballots?
I think they have like 2 more of the Ward 1 packets left, and then they're done. So they've gone through most of it already.
Was there another ward they're looking at?
There are 2 wards that they want to look at.
Ward 1 and 4.
1 and 4.
One and four.
Was
That's
the
what they
ones
told
that
me
they
when I
said
was up
that
there.
they want to look at.
Well, they started at 4. It's now 5:30.
Mhm.
Are they more than halfway through the
Yes.
number of ballots?
Yes.
At both wards?
Both wards. They've already finished Ward 4, they're on Ward 1, and they've already gone through some of Ward 1.
So if they do it, if they look at it the same time frame that we're talking about, are we talking another half an hour? I mean, is it a quarter, are there a quarter of the ballots left?
Two-hour appointment.
2-hour window, Don.
Yes, but if they're looking at it and they haven't get a chance to look at each ballot, and there were, I don't know how many there were in those wards, that doesn't, they have a right to look, to review those ballots.
Sure.
All right, if they're not dilatory and they've looked at and they're looking at the ballots, 2 hours is not sufficient, then it's not, then we cannot stop. We should not let this stop, as long as they're not dilatory.
Then, I think they have 3 people up there. I can make the suggestion of, because all 3 are looking at the same ballot, that it could be.
Do they know the person whose ballot it is?
No,
Right? They're just looking at a paper with it.
They're looking at this.
But they don't know whose it is.
Yeah, they're basically looking at this, and they're looking at this, and then they're moving on to the next ballot.
So they know.
This is what they're looking at.
So then if they know. Oh.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Ballots are still correct. We haven't.
Okay. Are we going upstairs?
You could stay out here until they've done what they're.
we probably should say,
What they're,
we probably should move to recess.
going
And
around.
do what?
We can move
Oh,
to recess
because
and
the
then reconvene, right?
Yes, we'll recess until we have,
Move to recess.
waiting for the,
Linda, let me help you. Move to recess?
second.
Second. Roll call.
Commissioner Bennett?
Yes.
Commissioner Franklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Cox?
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Moskowitz?
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes.
I make a motion, we adjourn?
Yeah, but you know, we're so,
Second.
Second it.
like, we went.
Okay, all those in favor?
All those in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Maybe that's something that has to be done.
Aye, aye.
Aye. Okay.
Maybe that's something
that's
to consider in the future.